We'll sort of play it by ear. If you see somebody climbing on the chandelier, that will be Doris. We tested very carefully the first day, and everybody could hear in the back row until we started to talk. And then I saw a lot of adjusting of ears and that sort of thing. We have a lot of contraptions up here that amaze me with their ingenuity. But I think now it sounds just right, and I hope everyone has clear hearing from this point on. In our wilderness experience, we are standing in a state of divinity, which is a state of no mortal self. And in the state of no mortal self, we are not responding to the senses and the evidence that they bring. Rather, we are upholding several principles. One is that there is only one creator. That there is only one body. That there is only one life. And there is only one consciousness. When you bring these into one synchronized awareness, the world of effects no longer has power, and you are in a position to prove the non-power of the world mind. Now, a friend of mine decides that he's faced with bankruptcy. And his problem is, if I am to walk in the wilderness in a state of divinity and I am faced with bankruptcy, how do I reconcile the two? What do I do? Another one has another crisis, and a third another crisis. And each is saying to themselves, what do I do in a state of emergency when I am supposed to be in a state of divinity? And that paradox must be answered. And that is going to be the first principle of your facing the wilderness on the 6th day. By now we'll assume we've done 5 days, and we're into the 6th, and before this lesson is over we'll be finished with 10 days of facing the wilderness, which you're going to do actually in those 10 days later. Today's principle will be, when you are faced with a situation that was not created by God, that is not happening in the one body, that is not happening in the one divine consciousness, and that is not happening in the one divine life, that situation is not happening. It is not happening. The bankruptcy is not happening. The other critical emergencies are not happening. And so what do you do when you face something that's not happening? you recognize that it is not of the one Creator, that it contains no divine life, that there's nothing for you to do about it but know the truth about it. And when you do this, you may be surprised to discover that that which is not happening slowly ceases to appear to be happening. Now that's a very hard thing, to look at that which is threatening and know it is not happening. But that's the principle. And later, when you are walking confidently in the awareness that you are in the kingdom of God, you'll even be reinforced by knowing this that I see is not happening in the kingdom of God. And so let's take a meditation now on it is not happening. And select that in your life which is disturbing and apply the 4 principles to it. Was it created by God? For instance, did God create tumors? Did God create germs? Did God create limitation? Did God create the evils that we countenance in this world? And as we apply this simple principle to them, and our answer becomes a clear no, God did not create this, that, and the other, then your next question is, how can it be there? And again, you are then alerted to the world mind hypnosis, which placed something there that isn't there. And this is your yardstick to uncover what the world mind is doing. It places a situation before you, a condition, a power, a problem, a disturbance. But God didn't place it there, and therefore you're looking at something that is in the world mind being re-echoed within your mind. It is not there. It is not happening. And now be still about it. Now something has to give this condition a life. Something has to move it. Something has to press it toward you as a form of threat. What is that force? What is the life within this situation? Is it divine? Is it of God? And when your answer is no, then if this tumor does not have the life of God in it, if this bankruptcy does not have the life of God in it, if whatever this critical emergency is does not have the life of God in it and was not created by God, then it is without life. What is sustaining it if it has no divine life? Only the belief that it is there. Nothing else can sustain it. And why do you believe it is there? Because your senses report it is there. Now that's the nature then of walking in the wilderness. We do not believe our senses. Our senses tell us something is so, but if it does not pass the test of did God create it and does it contain the life of God, then our senses are lying. They are deceiving us. Again, I face the situation with the knowledge that it is not happening. The body of God is infinite. To the human eye, there are many bodies. But God's body does not divide into many bodies. And so, is this tumor happening in the body of God? No. Is this bankruptcy happening in the body of God? No. Then it isn't happening in the divine body, which is infinite. And therefore, it is not happening. Where is this emergency happening? It's in the false consciousness of the world, not in the consciousness of God. But there is only one consciousness. Therefore, it is not happening in the one consciousness. It cannot be happening. Slowly you isolate those illusions of the world which seem to be external, which seem to be perilous, and which seem to contain within themselves the power of life and death. And you remove from them your belief that they have such power. All that kills is your belief in a personal self, in a body that is not the body of God, in a you that was not created by God, in a consciousness that is a personal consciousness, in a life that from beginning to end was not the life of God. And you've been putting all of your expectancy, all of your hopes and dreams and ambitions into a life and a body that actually is not you. And the more you pursue the awareness that there is another you, a you that is the life of God, the body of God, the consciousness of God, and was created by God, and that you is the Christ self, the more you become aware that such a Christ self exists, the more you become aware of the need for rebirth into the actual presence of your divine self. All of these lingering states of unrest in the material world are there as a reminder that you are departed from your divine self, that you have departed from the nature of your own being. And these false degrees of separation must manifest as the human problem. Now you see why the bottom line in the Bible is rebirth. Rebirth from that which claims to be you, which ultimately dies and never was you. And we begin to feel a new understanding of death. We see it in a totally different light. In fact, all of the human concept of death becomes obsolete. Death does not mean what it appears to mean. It is a mistranslation of the senses. That is why we are told that Jesus abolished death. What did that mean? People are dying all around us. How did he abolish something if it still appears to happen around us? We cannot ignore that statement. Before Jesus, the world faced no choice. The ultimate end of every person who walked the earth was death. Jesus, you might say, opened a trapdoor. He said, look, here's another way. It may appear as death to the world, but it's the entrance to life. It is the way to your divine life. And I call it rebirth. It's very different than death. It's a way in which you go through this trapdoor, and rather than come to a termination point or a return to an old state of consciousness, you move now into new dimensions. You don't die physically, but rather you die to the sense of being a mortal being. And suppose, for example, that you wanted to be a doctor. And you'd gone through all these years of study in college, and now there were no medical schools. There's just no way to go higher. Or suppose in any field of endeavor you wanted to go higher than you were, but there simply was no place to go. Well, that's how mortals are. The only place they've got to go is into a coffin. Jesus comes along and says, wait a minute, there is a place to go. There's a place to go that's higher. If you're ready for it, I've got the plan for you, and it works. And that higher plan is what I'm calling rebirth. Now, as you die to the world mind, as you die to the senses, as you die to the belief that you were created in time and must end in time, and as you become aware of the nature of God, you will find this trapdoor which leads you out of death into another experience called rebirth, or return to divine birth. And this secret trapdoor is your own identity. Wrong identity brings the wrong experience. Right identity brings the right experience. And now Jesus abolishes death by abolishing wrong identification. And so he says to his disciples, if you follow right identification, you will walk where I walk. You will do what I do. And you will transcend as I transcend. And in this return to your divine birth, you will discover that all of the evils in the world which had beset you existed only in the belief that there was a personal you. When that is gone, and you're not in a personal sense of life, you're still right there, but you're in your divine being, and the evils in the world have no place in you. Now, this is the trapdoor he opened for us, and it was his new concept of death which took the sting out of death and converted what we call death into an opportunity to rise into divinity on this earth. And that is why this class is so important. Finally, as a group, we are taking divine birth and making it our priority. We're not stopping along the way for lesser accomplishments. These will fall in line as we accomplish the main objective. The moment a measure of divine birth is part of your consciousness, in that moment all of the evils in the world face a different you, a you which is no longer helpless, a you which no longer has to resist and defend, but a you which is invulnerable just by virtue of your divinity. Now, we all start a day the same way. What I am going to do today, where I am going to go, who I am going to see, and what I would like to see happen. And oh yes, I just thought about it. I wonder what God had in mind. And then, when we find that we stumble, that's the time we really think about God. That's when the mortal prays to God, the mortal implores God, the mortal says to God, what do I do next? But the divine self doesn't go through these human contortions. It is a direct expression of God. It doesn't make false moves. It doesn't move into a world. It moves in the kingdom. It doesn't strive to attain. It is. It doesn't have to outthink its competitor. It lives in the consciousness of one, in the Father who knoweth our needs. And so we reverse the using of our own mortality as a nucleus for life. Whereas I focused my world around this personal self, which lived in this world, divine birth tells me that I am not this personal self, and I do not live in this world. And if I persist in maintaining this human attitude toward life, this human belief in living in a world, then I have no right to be a part of an activity called infinite way, because it teaches the very opposite. It teaches that your life must be built around your divinity, and that all priorities are given solely to living the divine will in the kingdom of heaven on earth, independent of all powers of this world. Let's look now at the direct route to attaining divine sonship. Are you accepting God as the creator of your universe? Or are you accepting the universe that God did not create? Where are you walking? Are you trying to accomplish what cannot be accomplished? Are you walking in one universe and seeking the help of God in another universe? Or are you walking in the universe of God? If you're in a mortal sense of self, you're making that universal error. The mortal sense of self cannot walk in the kingdom of God on earth. The mortal sense of self is not accepting God as creator, but rather is saying to the God who didn't create the mortal sense of self, be good to me and help me. All based on total ignorance. So let's remind ourselves that this which is not happening, these evils, these disturbances, these cataclysms, are not happening because I am standing in my divine self, which is invisible to human sense. That's where they're not happening. They're not happening in my divinity. They're not happening in my spirit. My spirit is not bankrupt. My spirit has no tumor. There's no threat to my spirit. And so if I live in a mortal sense of self, my defense is not to fight that which is trying to dominate my mortal sense of self, but to live not in that mortal sense of self. To live in and as my spirit. Your second principle will be then to honor the Creator by accepting no life that is not the life of God. And you might call this principle that there is no second life. That will be your second principle. There is no second life. The only life there is the life of God. It is never in a state of danger. It is never in a need of repairs. And that can be the only life that I know. I'm assuming you're willing to accept that the life of God is the only life you have. Now that life can never depart from you. That life always was your life. And because that life can never die, you can see that all thoughts of death are the belief in another life. Every belief in death is the belief that I have a life other than the life of God. And we're all subject to that false belief until we become spiritually educated. And so I say to you that your life, which is not the life of God, is a false life, a counterfeit life, a life that is not even your life, but rather a world belief that you have accepted. And then you have accepted that life to be inside this body. Now, God's life did not enter your body. That's very important to see. The life of God cannot enter your body, not this body, this physical image. And because the life of God cannot enter your body, there is no divine life in this body. You are living in a life that has no divine life in it, in a body that has no divine life in it. And there is a seed of future problems. You cannot live in a body that has no divine life in it and escape problems, because only divine life is under divine law. And so every human being on this earth, living in a mortal body, is living in a body without divine life. For divine life never enters a mortal body. And that is a major problem for every individual on this earth. But it is not a problem when you make your adjustment from believing that the life within this body is my life. And that's a difficult thing to do now. The life within this body is not your life. The life within this body is the life of the world mind counterfeited to simulate your life. And unfortunately, without any way of knowing this, we have all been born into such a belief, and we have accepted it. And so we have lived in mortal bodies without divine life in them, and we have striven to know God aright, and we cannot. The Creator did not create that body, which is mortal, or the life within it, and as long as you remain in such a state of thought, you are created by the father of lies, the world mind. And in times of stress, you will discover that the father of lies does not stand behind you and protect the body which that father created, because that's a false father, a false creator. And it has no power to maintain the false sense of body which it has foisted upon humanity. All who have died that death of the false body have died it because they had not reached the level of awareness that divine self is their name. And so they went back in their rerun once more to try to find that divine life, that divine self, which we are coming to grips with in our determination to return to divine birth. Now let's look closely at the body which does not contain divine life and see there the seed of every human problem. How can a body without divine life face the conditions that appear around it and survive? The only weapons it has are the false weapons of the world mind. Weapons that crumble under stress. Weapons that promise much and deliver little. But you have a divine Father. If so be you accept divine sonship. If so be you are true to your divine life. If you take the time and the effort and the energy to find your divine life and to face your undivine life and know the difference. If you believe in death, you do not know your divine life. If you believe in sickness, you do not know your divine life. You can clearly see then that unless you realize that divine life is perfect, and all that comes to you in the nature of imperfection is not divine life and therefore is part of the world illusion, you will succumb to it. You will resist it. You will grapple with it. Sometimes you will think you've won, sometimes you will know you've lost. But always you'll discover in the final analysis, you cannot defeat an illusion, nor can you control an illusion. You can spend an entire lifespan trying to control the illusions that are not there. Your divine life is perfect because your Father is perfect. And therefore, because your divine life is here, every imperfection in your life must be faced not as something to remove, but as something that has no existence. It is not happening in your divine life. That's a real change in consciousness. The imperfections of the world are part of the world dream. The knowledge that your life is the life of God and perfect enables you to face the world dream and to awaken from it. The awakening is the discipline to stand in the reality of perfect life with the knowledge that there is no second life. There isn't divine life and non-divine life. There isn't perfect life and imperfect life. There is perfect life, invisible, and the visible illusion of imperfect life. But there are not two. All that is your invisible divine life. And what is not is what appears to be. You don't face the illusion with a sword for that reason. Because in using the sword on the illusion, you bring into play only the illusion of yourself. Very few people have attained the conscious awareness of the nothingness of imperfect life. But you can come to it by degrees, by seeing the illusion of mortality. The fellow coming at you with a gun, he's not there. The gun he's carrying is not there. But if you think they're there, they're going to shoot. If you are so developed that in your consciousness they are not there, your consciousness will manifest. That's the beauty of truth. Your consciousness of truth will manifest. Now, you may look at a whole nation at war, and don't mistake me, I'm not saying that your consciousness of the non-reality of war is going to turn a country into peace. But it's going to turn it into peace where you are concerned. The war of that nation is not going to disturb your divine life. And there's a lot of people who are going to go through the throes and illusion of death because they're not in the awareness of their divine life. But as you stand in your truth, divine life is my name, the life of God is who I am, you will find you are in the secret place, and it will not come nigh thy dwelling. That may seem selfish, but we all have to live by our consciousness. We cannot borrow someone else's, nor can they borrow ours. We have to develop our own consciousness and let it shine, and then those who are aware of it will be attracted enough to investigate the nature of your divine consciousness, your divine life, and that is how you will bless the world. It is not happening was our first principle. The second is there is only one creator. There is no second creator. The third is there is no second life. There is only divine life. Now those three principles could be followed for many years, and you would still find yourself flinching at the sight of a fear of some kind, flinching at the sight of a visible object that threatens, flinching at the sight of a distress occurring in anyone in your family. But as you stand firm in the knowledge of your perfect divine life, you will find you can easily accept the perfect divine life of both friend and foe. I don't care who you're looking at. The life of that form you're looking at is not there. It's not that it's not divine only, it's that it's not there. That person is not there. That essence that is there is the invisible divine life. And that invisible divine life that is there is the reason the Bible says we are entertaining angels unawares. Everywhere we look, there is invisible divine life, and when you deny it to your neighbor, you have lost it, because it is not separate and apart from you, nor is it other than your own. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Recognize the divine life of your neighbor as the divine life of yourself, for there is no second life. Now we're behind the illusion. We're backstage. Up front, they're wearing masks. They are actors on a stage called mortals. Shakespeare thought they were very foolish. And we must come to the realization that we too are very foolish if we're up front on that stage wearing this mortal masquerade, animated by a force that is not our divine life. The masters of light who come to appear in the so-called world that we inhabit always bring with them one mission, and that is to awaken us. we like to ask them to be our leaders and to take us away from power of our enemies. And they do in a sense, but not the way we want them to. I think if you were a Hebrew in the days of Jesus, you would have done everything you could to persuade him to be your commander-in-chief. I think we would have offered him a lifetime pension if he would have accepted and just taken all those Roman tax collectors and sent them out of the provinces and said to Rome, that's the end of all this tax suppression. We owe you nothing. And there were many probably who wondered why this great healer refused to lead them against the oppressive power of Rome. And even today it is still unknown why he did not respond to their urging. Was he not the leader? Was he not a master? Was he not the Son of God come to lead man out of his captivity? But the masters of light do not come to lead us in physical force. They come to reveal the nature of our being. They come to reveal the non-existence of the oppressor, the non-existence of the curse, the non-existence of the evil. And it isn't the way human beings want them to treat them, but steadfastly, Jesus and others have stuck to their mission, which was simply to reveal that those who consider themselves oppressed are invisibly divine beings. Those who consider themselves sick and tormented are invisibly divine beings. Those who live in the chamber of horrors called a human life are invisibly divine being. This is the revelation of the Masters of Light. And it is the individual who understands this and makes a change of consciousness his or her supreme priority. It is this individual who is not worried about Rome, who is not worried about oppression, who is not worried about persecution. But first must come that knowledge that I cannot be persecuted, I cannot be dominated, I cannot be shortchanged, I cannot be terrorized. But I cannot do this until I know who I am. If I think I'm just another person, another mortal being, responding to the oppression of another mortal being, I am totally separated from my reality. I am without the only aid I can really have, which is divine power, divine wisdom, divine identity. And so we in the infinite way now are removing all belief in all evil in this world. As long as there is a belief that evil exists, even just the belief that evil exists for others, even the belief that in another country there is evil and not in ours, or in another state, in that belief that evil exists, you are denying the omnipresence of the Father. You are letting your sense mind persuade you that God is not omnipresent, that the power of God is not omnipotent, that the wisdom of God is not omniscient, and you have fallen prey to that very a substance called the world mind, which makes you a victim of the very evils you accept to exist. When you are living in the conscious knowledge that there is only divine life, then the oppressor is recognized as non-existent. And I don't care what names are given to that oppressor, what secret organizations they are, or how evil they look. If they contain no divine life, they do not exist. And in the knowledge of their non-existence, you must continue further and know that where they seem to be, only your divine life is. I may be repeating, overstressing, but it is necessary to complete the full cycle of awareness within ourselves that we are not the victims but the masters. As long as we are aware of the presence of our Father everywhere and the presence of our Father's life everywhere and our Father's love everywhere, no matter what the appearance may be. Now I hope then that I am talking to my own divine life, and that it sits in a chair looking as a friend, a student, a man, a woman. But neither male nor female is there, only divine life. And if you will think back to your childhood, just think as far back as you can, and think and try to find out just what you felt in those days, what you did in those days, what life was like for you in those days. You make an interesting discovery. You'll discover that you have no corporeal memory. Somehow, your senses only work in the present. They don't work in the past. When you think about your yesterdays, you don't think of yourself as a body. You think of things you like to do and all, things you felt, but you don't think of yourself as a physical form in those days. You think more of your emotions, your attitudes. And that's because that physical body of those days never was there. You don't really remember yourself as a physical body because there never was a body there. The only body you really know of is the body you seem to be in, because now your senses can feel it, touch it, look at it, see it. But you can't sensualize your body of yesterday as well. You don't even have a body memory. All you have is a mental image, and you know it's a mental image. There never was a body. It only seems to have been. And the proof is that it's not there. And you've got this now. And you know, if you haven't seen friends for a couple of years, how different they look? They totally seem to change. I've noticed that during the seminar. Somebody says, I'm so-and-so, and I say, my gosh. Are you really? Are you? Yes, I'm still that someone. Well, they look different. They act different. And that's because they are different. The physical structure is constantly changing right under our eyes, and living with it each day, we don't notice it as much as someone else who sees us 2 years later and says, you look just like someone I used to know. It's very interesting the way we change. And this changing self is not us. That's the point. The changing self is not us. All those changing selves we were yesterday, they're not us either. But us is that invisible divine self, which is not changing. And the change that occurs in what seems to be us is our changing concepts and our different relationship to the world mind or to the divine mind. Our shifting relationship to divine consciousness or world consciousness determines the changes in our appearance, our thoughts, our feelings, and our experiences. We're really not too aware of the fact that these changes that come about would not come about the way they do if we were living more in our divinity. And then when you see a friend who has been doing that, you'll notice that the changes in them are slightly different than the changes in others. There's something a little more suggestive of spirit in their appearance. By living in their divinity, to that extent they have walked away from the world consciousness, and somehow it shows through in them in interesting little ways. A different face, a different walk, a different style, a different grace, a different attitude, a different way of seeing things and talking, and an absence of fear in their face. You notice all of these things. And you feel them to some degree in yourself. Now take yourself, take fear. How close are we to stark fear as compared to when we were 15 or 20 years younger in human years? Do you remember when fear was a very high potential in your life? And do you remember when you first came through an experience in which you found you dominated fear? It didn't strike you in such a way that you began to palpitate at some threat of some kind? And then what did that? And finally, are you now in a state where you think you are still susceptible to fear? Well, when you are in divine life, what can you fear? And so, in a sense, your state of fear will determine, or rather be a measuring stick of the degree to which you have attained knowledge of your own divine life. Your own divine life does not fear anything. Because, you see, that which divine life would fear would have to exist. And because divine life is all, what can divine life fear? And when you're fearing, you are still in a state of thinking, or being persuaded to think, that there is something beside divine life. We can reach the stage where our fear shrinks and our equanimity is undisturbed by those human conditions which make us jump out of our clothes when we're in a human state of consciousness. So please, every time you find yourself fearing, let it be a guide to you that in some way you have lost the awareness that you are the infinite divine life of this universe. And you are fearing for that which you are not. Now, we're going to need that in our wilderness experience. Because if we woke up today with the knowledge that there's no second life, only divine life, we would have to maintain that consciousness throughout this particular day. In the home, in the office, on the highway, wherever you go, this particular day, there is only divine life, and it is I. And therefore, everything that in any way is unfriendly or outright threatening, or in some way not harmonizing with me, it's either because I am losing the awareness of divine life, or that which I am accepting there, I am giving a sense of reality to. Now this principle works. It's very powerful. And it's very quick. Your enemy is a lie, because only your divine life is there. And when you're in a state of an enemy, instead of divine life, you're only getting the result of your own limited consciousness. And so, similarly with the bankruptcy, similarly with the tumor, similarly with every situation, because your divine life is unconditioned. I would think that if you're not in possession of that book by Joel, which has the chapter Unconditioned Infinity, it would be wise to bone up on it day after day after day, because you can't go out as divine life unless you have a good, solid awareness that infinity is unconditioned. Unconditioned infinity is the nature of the kingdom around you. And that's because divine life is unconditioned and divine life is infinite. And so when Joel writes about unconditioned infinity, he's writing about divine life. Because that's what it is, unconditioned infinity. But I am that divine life. And my life is unconditioned and it is infinite. And therefore, what is outside of that? Is there anything external to infinity, to divine infinity? No. Is there a war anywhere in this world to you if you are in divine life? Or is there a world consciousness of war which you recognize? Are you worrying about your son being drafted in case of that war spreading? Are you worrying what happens when the world goes half mad? Then you're not worrying about the truth. You're worrying about that which has no existence because only divine life is there. This must become a day-in, day-out awareness, and let it stretch out to every so-called condition that in any way affects your experience that day. There is no second life, only divine life. There is no second creator, only the one divine creator called God. And there is no second body, only the infinite, invisible divine body of God. There's no body to go to war, and that includes your son. Include your son in the divine body, but include my son too, and everyone's son, because it is one infinite divine body. And this consciousness of one infinite divine body will have an effect on the so-called death or susceptibility to death of other individuals. There's a fourth point. There is no second consciousness. Last night we talked of there being one infinite consciousness, only one. Now that consciousness is running its universe, and it is running it perfectly. There is no second consciousness to run it imperfectly. So either you're aligned with the one perfect consciousness, or you are persuaded that there is a second. And the world mind loves people who believe there's a second. That's the vulnerable Achilles heel that it attacks. Your belief that there is another consciousness than God is the gap which is attacked by the world mind. And so let's repair our fence right there. In your 10th day, or 9th day, whatever it is, you will awaken in the morning with the knowledge that there is only one consciousness. There is no second consciousness. And so wherever you go, all that can exist is the consciousness of God. And in that consciousness there is no darkness. There is no iniquity. That must be your consciousness that day, because there is no other. To look at the world from the consciousness of God instead of the consciousness of a physical mortal is your test for that day. That's a very restraining test. It stops you from committing all kinds of foolish judgments and making all kinds of personal decisions and determining all kinds of willful activities, because all that exists today is the consciousness of God. And therefore all that I can do must emanate from that consciousness, and I can do nothing else. On such a day, you will not make one single mistake. Let's review our 5 principles. 1 creator, no second creator. 1 life, no second life. 1 body, no second body. 1 consciousness, no second consciousness. And finally, that which seems to be happening, which is not the one body, the one consciousness, the one life, and of the one creator, is not happening. Now, your fidelity to those 5 principles over 5 days will change your days, enough so that as you go into the 5 days after that, you'll find these principles, by then there will be 10, these principles will be synchronizing. And even though they're not all conscious principles, you find yourself going back to one and then the other, and pretty soon they'll be homogenizing. And instead of going the first transmission and then the second and the third and then the 4th gear and having to go through all of that like a new driver, you just go whizzing along with all of these gears shifting more automatically, and the world will lose its potency and its power to deceive and its power to hurt, its power to pain, its power to confuse us and cause our frustrations. I've seen so many well-intended people in a state of frustration because they were thinking from the personal sense of life. What will I do today? What will I get? Who will I see? Rather than beginning with their divine selfhood. And they do change. They change beautifully and dramatically. We have 10 principles. If we can meditate now on the existence of divine life where you stand, please include in it the knowledge that the divine life where I am has no second. This meditation has no meaning unless you practice it sufficiently to attain the knowledge that my divine life is where I am and not a human life. There must be a shift over, an inner realization that my human life is not here. Only my divine life is here. And that's the purpose of this meditation. Not to pin divine life on intellectually, and not to accept it while still living in all the habits of a human life, but to make a shift in consciousness so that, as Jesus did, we could say, "Thou seest me, thou seest the Father." Let's see if we can reach a measure of understanding there, that my divine life is here. And try to find some evidence for that. The kingdom of God is within you. The Father within me doeth the works. I is my name, and I am the life. The life of God has never stopped being your life, even when you were unaware of it and running off as a prodigal in another life. Son, my life is thy life. All that I have is thine. The life of God is right where you seem to be. And that life is who you are. I am the life of God. That is how we honor the Father and love the Father supremely, by being consciously devoted to living in that life, as that life, letting the Father's life express as the only life you will acknowledge. In all thy ways acknowledge me. I was reminded earlier of a statement by Jesus which fits perfectly into where we are. Father, I will that they also, whom thou hast given me, be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which thou hast given me, For thou lovest me before the foundations of the world. I wouldst that they be with me, and that with me. Where was he? And are we included in that statement? I wouldst that they be with me. Where is the Christ? And how can we be with the Christ? Only in our divine life. No mortal is with Christ. Only in divine life are we with Christ. For that divine life is Christ. Divine life is Christ life. And when you accept divine life, you are with Christ. And Christ is your life. And you are not completing your acceptance as long as you withhold even a fragment of human life. For human life is the counterfeit of the world mind, and divine life is your name. All of the ills of human life are completely foreign to your being as human life itself. Every ill must be seen to be a suggestion which expresses in your experience only because of your unconscious acceptance of a human life. When you consciously recognize human life to be an impostor, and consciously step out of the belief in the existence of human life, you are awakening from the dream. And in that awakening, your divine life is found to be right where you are, functioning perfectly, immaculate, unto eternity. That is another life, and it is not attained by dying physically. It is attained by the death of mortal sense. And that is the death that Jesus taught, and that is how he abolished death. The death of mortal sense is the trapdoor to divine life, which is eternal and is not in the future. It is not attained by a succession of tomorrows. It is here in the now of being. I am eternal life, divine life, perfect life, infinite life, the only life there is, the life of God. This is so clear, so beautiful, so true. There is no second life. And that is why we learn how to die in order to live. We do not die physically. We die to the false sense of life, that we may live. That is why we are told to lose our life, that we may find our life. We lose the mortal sense of life. We accept the immortal life, which is without beginning or end, and without impediment. Now, the deepening of that consciousness is the only protection you need against any evil this world can throw at you. Because the evils of the world cannot touch your divine life. If you're worried about your life, you're in a state of duality. And it isn't something to be ashamed of, because it's normal for a human being. But it's not normal for one who has become dedicated to the path of illumination. You will discover, too, that this life is the only salvation. All talk of salvation without the knowledge of divine life is wasted. My divine life is my salvation. That's going to be a very interesting day when you take that into consciousness. And I can make a very safe prediction that when you have some realization of it, in which the old consciousness, the old mortal sense of life falls away, you will never go back. The bottom line of all mystical teaching, then, is divine birth accepted. And the way to accept it is by dying to live. You will find that in another passage that I think we must cover, in Matthew 16. Just the 21st verse. From that time forth, began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised again the third day. Now, that was a physical, visible enactment of your consciousness. The suffering and being killed was a statement that we must learn to die to mortal sense. The father of Christianity was teaching that unless you die to mortal sense, to mortal life, and accept divine life, you are not getting the message of the Christ. And his disciples followed. And each of us has the privilege of being one of those disciples. I'd just like to continue here in the silence, if you will, because I feel the strength of it, the gentle power of it, and the pulse. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you tonight in oneness.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button below. It really helps us out. And why not share this video with your friends? Spread the word and help us reach more people. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video from us. Thanks for watching and see you next time.